meetings today. We will have the South Dallas Urban Renewal Economic Development Committee meeting, since we have guests here today. And looking forward to hearing them. Okay. Everyone taking a look at the minutes.
I have a change here. I'm making the transition. I didn't know we were doing to the South Dallas. It seems to me that no, I take it back. That's my change is going to be to the other one. The other
Not for this one. No. Okay. Okay. Can we have a motion?
Move for approval of the minutes?
Okay. Oops, sorry. Got to remind everybody, including me, to turn your phones off. Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Sustained. Okay.
I discovered that it may be in that, and it's at the top on line 43. It says, Mr. Latter proposed an amendment to the motion follows recommend that the city council grant the authority to the South Dallas. That may be the agency instead of the city council.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Noted, so noted.
Okay.
Good correction. Thank you.
Tyler, are you going to introduce our guests?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am happy to introduce Robert Melbo from Oregon's Department of Transportation. He's a state rail planner with the department. And then we have Michael and Renee from Genesee, Wyoming, here to be able to join our discussion that the committee's been having about rail access to the site, next steps, and everything related to rail as it runs through the industrial portions of Dallas. So I'll turn it back over to you to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to this. It's been a big topic of discussion since we have 40 plus acres of industrial land with rail through it. So how would you like to proceed? Which one of you would like to go first?
Well, thank you for having us here. So I'm Mike Ewan. My role is industrial development. Basically, what I do is I help customers find a parcel adjacent to our rail line so that they can get rail access. So, a site like the former Weyerhaeuser mill is, a perfect example of large industrial properties that we can develop for that. The challenge with this particular line, of course, is that it's been out of service for quite some time. But I'll let Renee introduce herself as well.
You just have to speak into the mic and it'll turn on.
Voice activated.
Oh, it's voice. Oh, I see. Okay. Excuse me. Hey, Renee Lasapio, Portland Western Railroad. I'm based in the Portland area. Been with G&W for 2 years, and to Michael's point, so my role within G&W and covering the Portland Western Railroad, so I'm responsible for all of the customer relationships. We serve roughly over 100 customers, either through Rail Direct or through our transloaders that then work with multiple customers. And so to Michael's point, this particular property, there aren't many properties quite like it in Oregon. And so Michael's key role is to work with the economic development agencies across all of the counties with which we work in to help land industry. So I am familiar with the property. And we've looked at it in the past for specific either storage opportunities or, and I believe I can kind of share from a high level some of the customers and agencies that have looked to make landfall there. The track is currently out of service, but we do currently have rail cars out on that property. I believe the track itself is about 2 to 3 miles long. So again, it's got good bones. It is a track that would need reinvestment if you were to land a customer or transfer station. But when we think holistically about the state of Oregon, there are very few properties that are quite like it.
And the biggest threat that I face in my role is losing these rail properties. An emerging threat is the data center. Data centers, for some reason, they gravitate towards rail served properties with track in place and purchase them. And then, of course, they have no use for the track. So anytime these rail properties become available, we do our best to preserve them for rail purposes, because once they're gone, they'll probably never come back. And of course, it's Murphy's Law, right? The minute you redevelop it into doing something else, an opportunity will come along, and it would have been the perfect site for a rail opportunity. And so, we try to emphasize to all of our partners and the communities, a company that would land here would probably be a large manufacturing company that would bring a lot of jobs, a lot of high-paying, skilled jobs, most likely, and that would benefit the community. So that's what we're striving to do. There's just some challenges with capital, but those can be overcome with the right customer.
So, thanks for coming today, by the way. Given what you just said, how does your group incentivize someone? So, because what you're describing is nirvana. I mean, everybody wants it. How do you get it? And is there any kind of way in which you can help incentivize that it comes here?
So it is possible for us to invest capital to restore the line. Generally, what we ask for is a volume commitment in return. Obviously, we have to get that money back, and we need some assurance that we can. So if the right customer comes on board with a healthy amount of rail volume, and that site is fairly large, so most likely they would have quite a bit of rail volume, that's something that we can do. Now, we are a small railroad, which has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages being that we're easier to do business with than the large carriers. It's cheaper to do business with us and build off our main line. The service is much better. But the disadvantage is that when the freight payer pays that freight rate, we have the short haul. We're only hauling it a few dozen miles or maybe 50 miles. And so if you're only making a few $100s a car, it's hard to invest millions of dollars to help incentivize that customer. And the large railroads, they probably don't care so much. They've got bigger fish to fry. So that's the challenge for us. But for the right customer, we can invest the capital to help incentivize it.
One other thing, you mentioned that you've looked this over, you see some value to it. Do you feel like we're in a position that we're partnering together to go out and incentivize this to a potential customer? In other words, that they know with confidence that you'd be a partner to invest in it? Or is that work we need to do still if we were to be connected with you guys in a part?
We have taken steps there. We advertised the site on our industrial development website. Peter and I have been working on and off for quite some time. I think the only thing that maybe held us back a little is there was some uncertainty maybe in how to market it, given the unknown in terms of what it would cost to bring the track back. And they didn't want to do any false advertising to customers as far as what it would take to restore service. But I think we are on the right path. And Tyler's been helpful in putting these out as the RFPs come in through the state, that Dallas is a viable site for that. So I think we are doing the right things. There probably is a little bit more advertising maybe we could do. The Union Pacific has a program to put a focus on certain industrial sites. And this is an old Union Pacific line. So that's something I'm working with them right now. And I've submitted this site for them. So they'll promote it to their customers. So that's another audience that, could look at this as a prospective landing spot.
And what you're talking about, sorry, I'll get off this, but is there something we can do to help push that through with Union Pacific? I mean, if we were talking about more more enthusiasm from Dallas, more, or do you feel like you have everything you need to keep pushing that through?
I'm waiting for feedback from them. I think the one thing that may be helpful, they'll probably come back with a lot of questions about the potential for what kind of power, water, utilities that site could have. A lot of these industrial users have huge, use requirements for that sort of thing. So I may need help there. And then, of course, if there's any, tax abatements, things like that. If it's in an enterprise zone, things like that, that would be helpful.
Thanks.
Quick follow on. So you talked about investing capital into that line. Is there any opportunity, because UP would also get business from this line? Is there avenues that you guys use with UP to help incentivize or add to what the dollar amount would be to reinvigorate those tracks? Because they'll see an uptick in business as well, and it's goodness for them as well. Follow on, any ballpark ideas of how much that track extension would cost, ballpark? And lastly, I'll get all my questions in at once. It's not only just the mill in my mind, but that whole corridor of your track that runs into Dallas that potentially could be developed. Some of it, Charlie may be able to speak to, may already be industrial lands or industrial zoned, but I mean, there is frontage on other properties as well, I think. So, which would benefit everybody involved. That's it.
I'll give my perspective on the UP portion, and Renee may have a different perspective, but I would be cautiously optimistic that they would assist with any financial commitment. Generally they're focused on, the longer haul traffic, not necessarily these branch lines. So it's something we could definitely ask. I'd be skeptical that they would make a contribution there. Just by magnitude, those large railroads, they move, 10 million carloads a year. Whereas a large short line like Portland and Western, I mean, 10,000 carloads is a lot. So just the order of magnitude, I mean, it'd be way down on their radar. As far as the track estimate, I don't know how precise we've gotten it. If someone's actually walked the track, or we've run like a geometry car, which is more advanced equipment we use to check the stature of the line. But the last estimate I saw, it's going to be, well into the six figures, possibly approaching $1 million. Now, we can refine that, but that's probably a realistic ballpark. And then your last question about developing, other business on the line, certainly it makes it a lot easier, because now you've got, if someone did move into Dallas, now you've got, an anchor tenant, so to speak. You've restored the line, and now that burden is not placed on anybody else who would locate along the line. And there are some customers right at the very beginning of the subdivision, like Nutrient Ag. That's pretty much where the track goes out of service out there. So there is traffic on this subdivision, not a lot, but there is still some remaining customers there. But do you have a perspective on UP?
Yeah, so with respect to UP's interest, I think I just made a note that I think their ears will perk up definitely regarding the commodity that a prospective customer will handle, either on the inbound or outbound freight movement, or the customer itself. So kind of a window into their world. So they're structured similarly to PNWR. So, they have a commercial team and they have commercial targets, and markets fluctuate, right? And so they might have an initiative to grow a particular portfolio of business. So Or there might be a customer who says, "Hey, I want to land on a short." And we've had customers who have said, "Hey, I specifically want to land on a short line because I know they can give me much more attention with respect to rail service on a day-to-day basis, but I want to be able to be UP accessible." To Michael's point, this line is a UP heritage line, and we have had circumstances where customers or leads have wanted to land in the Willamette Valley, and they've said that, well, we want to be served BNSF direct. And that does unfortunately create a hurdle because we can't ship BN direct from this particular property. It has to ship via UP, and then there needs to be a handoff from the Union Pacific to the BNSF. And so to Michael's point too, ways to help, I think definitely, just having kind of one of the things that we've prepared for customers who are looking to navigate some of the permitting in I cover both Washington and Oregon. So we've kind of prepared kind of a high level outline for customers, who are the key agencies they need to connect with, does SEPA need to be involved based off of proximity to waterways? Who is the key lead with, I guess in Oregon, in Washington, it's the Department of Ecology, but in Oregon, it's it's slipping my mind.
The DEQ, I think.
The DEQ.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So who are the key points of contacts at the DEQ? So I think having, kind of a, maybe like a pathway plan, so that when, customers do what they do best, right? They are either manufacturers, there's the subject matter experts in what they do. But the permitting side, they sometimes need to hire outside consultants. Consultants can have varying degrees of experience. And so having the locality provide some guidance as far as how to make landfall here, I think is definitely helpful.
I would echo that point that Renee made. Depending on who the customer is, if it's a big national account for Union Pacific and they have relationships at the highest levels of Union Pacific, there's a much stronger chance that Union Pacific will contribute capital to that.
Yes.
Hi, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. My name's Brian Dalton. I've got a few questions probably. First of all, one thing you made reference to a large industry that would be the ideal customer, I guess, for your service. We've had experience with these here in this community where we rely on them as an industrial enterprise and pay taxes and buy our water and that sort of thing. And then they pull out on us cold turkey and leave us without the taxes, without the water, customer, et cetera. Weyerhaeuser comes to mind, Tyco Industries, Caterpillar Tractor are three of them that came here, got us kind of hooked on big industry and then left. Our site down there has been advertised now as rail, possible rail, let's put it that way. And we haven't had any bites on that, serious customers on that for some years. We could hold this open for you with your spider web of tracks down there, and that puts that land into some kind of limbo for us. In other words, we can't turn it over to commercial uses or very light industries, that sort of thing, if we're holding out for the big fish. You come in with, another Caterpillar Tractor, another Weyerhaeuser, another Tyco's Industries to occupy a large degree and put all our eggs in that basket, essentially. We did something similar up in the La Creole node, which was our commercial node up in north part of Dallas. We identified in 1998, 27 years ago, a need for 70 acres up there. So we held it in advance to develop those acres of general commercial land. We were waiting in our plan for either a developer to come in and pay for the infrastructure or for the city to pick up the ball and develop the infrastructure. As it turned out, nobody blinked. And the infrastructure, they didn't turn a shovel of dirt or rezone a single acre of general commercial land in 27 years. I could foresee something like that happening here, where we're waiting for the big customer to come to occupy the whole space for another 27 years. Actually, what we need to do is move with this. In my estimation, we need to fish or cut bait. But just dangling it out there as a rail service for year after year, maybe decade after decade, does not seem like an appealing prospect to me. Thanks.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here, Michael. Good to see you again. I'm Eric Anderson with the Economic Development, with SEDCOR, Regional Economic Development Organization. I know Tyler and I both participated in Business Oregon's recent, they did a kind of a regional workshop around their targeted industries. So they're out looking at kind of ground truthing the industries that they target for, recruitment and development in Oregon. One of the things that comes up is, that we're not particularly proactive when it comes to promoting Oregon. We tend to be responsive to leads, and particularly with the state being the one that's, supposed to be most proactive. Can you help us with data as far as rail serving industries, rail dependent industries, locations in the Pacific Northwest or West Coast, what the trends are? Something that gives us some information so we can be more proactive in who we should be talking to. We do get a lot of attention with data centers. I'd never really tied it to rail before, but you tie it to where there's power capacity. And then, of course, that's the overlap. We haven't traditionally been told that we have that much power capacity for a data center. So one of the other things I think we should be talking about is water, sewer, power capacity. I mean, if we're talking about large industrial companies coming into that area, do we have the capacities beyond rail to serve them? I think that's, something we probably need to be looking at as a commission, working with the staff as well. But I guess my question is, are there resources that you can provide that help us with learning about the potential market more, and how do we play a more active role in trying to attract those industries to the region? Because we've only got like 2 sites in the whole 3 counties that we serve that are rail served, former mill sites. Generally, there's some infill and some rail served buildings and things. But when it comes to find us a 40-acre site that's got rail, it's, other than Dallas, there's really only one other one that I'm aware of that we submit regularly.
Certainly help in that regard. I mean, it's a challenge for us too. So we have a national sales team that calls on all these large customers. And obviously what we try to do is get ahead and try to figure out, well, where are you going to expand? Where are the holes in your network where you might need a site? And we try to get ahead of that. But, that's always challenging. Sometimes they don't want to share that. Some of them keep that very close to the vest. But to the extent that we have that, and we've identified companies that are looking to expand in this area, certainly we can share that with you. But it's a challenge for us too. It's not like we have all this data and we know exactly where they're going to go. Although that would make my job a lot easier.
Kind of to pull vault off of what I just heard my colleagues talk about is Oregon has dropped 11 places in terms of ranking as business friendly, business cooperative in the nation. We're number 39 out of 50 states. So it doesn't look like there's a robust effort at the top in the government to help us with what we're talking about here today.
Several EDCs in the state that lament that fact and have cited the number of businesses that are going away. Now, good thing, bad thing, Washington and California aren't really any better.
Promise one more question only. Kind of an awkward question, but I have to ask it. If this if this line was controlled by Union Pacific instead of you guys, would it be easier to market?
No, I don't think so. As I said, the large railroads are really good at the long haul shipments of long trains, unit trains, 100-car train of the same commodity, that sort of thing. They really don't have, they're not going to say this publicly, but they don't have a real interest in doing the switching at what we call the first mile and the last mile, that customer service, that
I
white,
just want to get it down. Yeah.
which is why they spun it off to us in the first place. So I really don't think so. And the cost to do business with them and the time it would take to get through all their committees, it would be dead on arrival. I worked for a large railroad. I spent most of my career at BNSF, so I already know how it works over there.
Yeah, I'll complement Mike's point. So I also came from Norfolk Southern and Canadian Pacific, now CPKC. So understanding some of the hurdles internally and approval process is at times much more cumbersome at the class 1 level. We have the benefit within G&W, we're much flatter. So there's not many degrees of separation between us and the decision makers and the way that we're broken up regionally. And so we funnel through operations. And so, for example, the follow-up from this meeting, I will convey to my general manager, and that will then be conveyed to our VP of operations. So, who pretty much oversees all of the Western Territory. So we have that. It's a great benefit to have that transparency. Also, word travels quickly in case anything comes up. Yeah, I think. And that's not to say that we don't have built relationships with the UP too. We work with we have a liaison point of contact who kind of manages new opportunities, and we'll convey new opportunities to them as they come about. So the communication is there, but from G&W, we're pretty flat management wise.
And just the order of magnitude. So a large customer at a site like this one would be like 500 carloads a year, 1,000 carloads a year. UP's doing 10 million carloads a year. It doesn't move the needle for them. For us, it's a big deal. We're going to do everything in our power to capture those carloads. We fight for every single one, being a small railroad.
So somewhat thinking aloud, would it be helpful for prospects, industries looking for space to fully understand what the cost implications are going to be? You mentioned a special rail car. There's crossings for ODOT that need to be taken into consideration as far as where does the line end, or does it end at Main Street for future development purposes? Is there merit, or is it feasible to say this is the type of quantity or size of an operation that your railroad would need in order to get something up and running? So like we are trying to remove question marks about the property on multiple fronts, creek, et cetera, to understand that going in so customers know versus, well, we've got to sort through that. Is that feasible? And it seems it would align with, fully vetting, which I think we're working on. Here's the available power, here's the available water. So customers can say, oh, this is the home inspection's been done before we place an offer or dive into it. Is that feasible?
It's been a couple years since we've asked for an estimate, so we can certainly refine that. And then it's pretty easy for our finance people to put that into a model and say, okay, based on our revenue, how many carloads will we need to pay for this track? If we're the ones who are going to restore the whole line. So, that's a fairly simple exercise. We just need to get the inspector out here.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think too, also take into consideration the kind of industry that would prospectively land. Like there might be a need for additional infrastructure. Being familiar out with that particular track, we had explored. It's called a Y. So there's one of three ways you can turn around a locomotive, and one is on a Y where it's basically three tracks that meet, right? And so that requires additional infrastructure, namely additional switch points to then connect the rail. And that the reason that that's important is because if you're going to land a large volume customer, you're going to need to be able to get around the equipment and get around the train. And so that kind of investment could be, I'm not sure what the estimate as of late is to build a third leg of the Y, but that would be, the cost associated with building out the rail is also project specific, right? But if we were to just say, hey, to bring this track back up to, back into service, it would require ties and joint work and, addressing some switch points and putting together an estimate of blank. And that's something that we've done too for other leads on our railroad. And we actively work through, again, because folks want to align a site and a scope. And then in turn, we also have a preferred list of contractors that we'll then work with in order to make sure that our customers are set up and they get the appropriate work done.
And unlike a class one that's running high speed trains, I mean, we probably will only operate at about 10 miles an hour. So, that reduces the amount of capital needed.
Turn the mileage too. It's not that we can't go a little bit faster toward 25 miles an hour, but the faster you go on a railroad, the more you have to maintain it, right? So you constantly have to do inspections and whatnot. So.
Any other comments?
One more question, I guess, before we leave the subject is with Bob here, and maybe get a chance to hear from ODOT Rail. Like, what is kind of your role in this? And as the community is looking for projects or opportunities there, how can we get some support from ODOT Rail?
Well, one thing in your favor is that there is a shortage of rail-served industrial properties in the state. So, when you have an area that has the capability of being served by rail, that's definitely an advantage, especially since so many other areas have kind of gentrified in the last few years and have kind of moved away from rail, including some of the industrial parks that actually were established by the railroads. I'm thinking now of the Beaverton Industrial Park up in Beaverton that was a Southern Pacific project, and they also had one in Clackamas called Clackamas Industrial Park, and the railroad purchased property and built lead tracks, into the area. Sort of did a preliminary development plan, and then they sold and leased parcels to businesses that wanted to move in that would use rail for transportation.
Seems to be kind of phasing us out now too.
I'm not surprised to hear that. But that was a number of years ago. Since then, two big things have happened. One is that there's been, a huge move toward containerization of freight rather than having it, delivered in boxcars on a spur track next to a warehouse. And then, of course, the development of these industrial parks in more recent years by communities, are in many cases miles away from the nearest rail line. So there's no hope at all to get rail service into them should someone even want that. So the fact that you have sort of an industrial site here that is large and already has the railroad in a sense is kind of like a utility. I mean, it's you have power, you have water, you have sewer, you have possibility of rail transportation because the railroad is there. I think you need to keep in mind that let me say this: the Portland and Western people have done a great job of responding to your questions, and probably I could not do a better job than what they've done here this morning or this afternoon now. But I think that ultimately, the patience of PNW and of Union Pacific, which is the underlying owner here, is not infinite. Eventually, if there is no need for this 5-mile line up here to Dallas, it's probably going to go away. And if it does, it'll never come back. So if there's something we can do to prolong the, the availability of rail service here and in the hopes that would eventually attract some kind of a business that will come in and use it, that would be great. But sooner or later, if if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind. And one other thing I'd like to throw out here, and that is that it would be possible for, we have this Connect Oregon program at ODOT. That's a grant program that's designed for non-highway transportation, such as marine, aviation, and rail. And we've had about 10 iterations of Connect Oregon since it was created back in 2005. And the railroads really have done quite well with that program. I mean, typically what it is, it requires about a 20% match on the part of the railroad, and then you get an 80% grant for the rest of whatever the project is. And I would think that a project to restore this line to operating condition would be a good candidate for Connect Oregon. I can't tell you that can't guarantee that you would get a grant or they would get a grant to rehab the line, but it certainly would be an opportunity and a possibility to look at that should there be a need to revamp this line. I think once before the city put in for a Connect Oregon application, but the problem with that was that you didn't really have any prospect of a customer. It was more of a build it and they will come type thing. And the Connect Oregon program really isn't designed for that kind of a dream project. It typically what we want to see with Connect Oregon is a legitimate need, a real business purpose, that something is going to come out of it that will create more jobs, and more rail traffic and that sort of thing. So, but if you had somebody on the line here that was interested in coming in and locating here, that would certainly be an impetus for possibility of a Connect Oregon grant.
I reiterate, I should say, I'm a fan of rail. I think it's great, along with aviation in particular, for Oregon. So I'd like to see a successful situation, but at the same time, I'm worried about us being in a limbo status here where we have to move one direction or the other. Big industry down there, or make it a combination, say, of light industry and the type of commerce that supports that sort of thing, like Tractor Supply or Ag West or something like that, make a great center for that kind of thing. But there wouldn't be room then for a great big industry that's using a lot of rail cars. So as long as we're in this limbo state, we can't fully develop either vision. And so this idea of waiting and waiting and waiting for, the ideal customer to show up is daunting, I'd say. I have ideas in my head like having a way station out there at Derry, with a sidebar track, and just truck stuff 3 or 4 miles out there and transload it onto a rail car. It's on the main line, easy to handle. It's just right there. That would be sort of a mix you might be able to do with a smaller industry. So there's some flexibility there too, I would think. But I just can't imagine being in this limbo state, being in this room years from now saying, well, we just don't know yet what we're going to do with this property. And the big picture is it's privately owned. We don't acknowledge that enough. And the owners, represented by very well, I think, by Peter, have their ideas too about marketing it and using it, make a decent return on investment. Thank you.
Your point is well taken. I mean, can't wait around forever, and there's economic realities. A good offer for some other use may come along.
Yeah, my sentiments echo Michael's. We understandably hear you loud and clear and understand what you're up against. I will cite just one quick example of an entity that may have been in the same position. So Port of Grace Harbor up in Aberdeen, Washington. So Port of Grace Harbor 10, 15, 20 years ago, very small port out here on the West Coast. And they sold a portion of their property to accommodate for a Home Depot to be constructed. Since then, markets change, markets fluctuate. We've seen congestion at Port of Vancouver, BC, Port of Portland, Port of Seattle, Port of LA. And so as a result, we've seen an influx of business to the Port of Grace Harbor. And Port of Grace Harbor has definitely expanded since. But there's limitations, right? Because they lost a very large parcel of property as a result of having a industry that was not a port tied industry make landfall on that property. So it's a difficult situation to be in, and unfortunately we don't have a crystal ball to predict the future. But thinking of market cycles, maybe in the next 5 years, but I will say that, and I'm not sure if Michael mentioned this earlier, when we do have customers that are looking for larger acreage parcels, I mean, this is the one that's on our list. This is the one that we put out in front at First Take. So it is one that we are actively marketing and do pitch because we do think that there, to Bob's point, there aren't many like it.
So that's a good cautionary tale. So at the Port of Grace Harbor, you have this retail Home Depot there taking up this space that they could have used to expand. It's not a distribution center or anything. It doesn't use rail. It's an actual retail store. So it was an unfortunate use, and I'm sure they regret that today.
All these decisions right at the, right there. Big decisions for the city. Charlie, you wanted to say something?
Charlie Mitchell, I'm with the city staff. We've met before. So I'm going to take Mr. Dalton's comment and turn it into a more pointed question for you, Michael. And I recognize that there's a myriad of variables that might challenge you to answer this question, but I think it'll help with some of our decision making, especially for Peter. So we're exploring whether or not we divide up the parcel, whether we change some of the zoning at the site. I think a key point that would help us in that decision-making process is to understand, and I'm looking to you as the expert, what would you say, based on your experience, is the minimum size of acreage that would generate the volume needed to restore the rail? And so like if, we got basically 50, 60 acres there now, about 40 of it is really flat and usable, I think. Is that right, Peter? That's roughly numbers, right? Something like that. So we don't want to do the Grays Harbor blunder, hopefully, I guess. So how do we avoid that? And how could we maximize the site and still allow us the most flexibility for options down the road? Is there a sort of a minimum size that you've seen?
That is hard to answer. I'd say at least 20 to 25 acres for the size of customer we would need, unless we're going to do it in tandem with some other customer somewhere else on the line. So you wouldn't have too much to give up.
That's helpful. So that's the answer I was looking for. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
If I may, so Michael, you mentioned earlier about trying to get a more certain cost estimate in terms of the restoration of the line, bringing out an inspector, things like that. What would be the avenue for this body if they wanted to pursue something like that, to initiate that process with the railroad? Like, what would be the costs incurred with that? Is that something that is done within the company, or is that something you contract out? What does that process look like, and how would that be something that we'd want to initiate if the body wanted to move in that direction?
Typically, we just have our own in-house engineering team go out and do the estimate. Now, my personal opinion, sometimes I feel like they give a really high estimate, sort of CYA, and it's not necessarily what we need. but I'm not an engineer and I can't argue with them. So, I have to go with what they say. You could independently hire a contractor to go provide an estimate, walk the line and provide an estimate. We've done that in a similar situation in California where a customer hired a contractor for an out of service line. They got in our vehicle and they did a high rail. That's a truck that basically runs along the track. And they went out there with our roadmaster, who's an engineering expert, and came up with their own estimate. So that is an avenue if you wanted to pursue it. But generally, we just use our in-house engineering personnel to do it.
And is there a cost associated with that?
That particular case, it was the contractor that did a lot of work with us, and they were also doing work for that customer, so they did it for free. So that is a possibility. There are obviously go-to contractors that we have in Oregon that do so much work with us. Maybe they would just go out there and do it for free.
But for your in-house team to do that, is there a cost? No. And what length of time would that take?
Really just based on availability. Who would cover this area? Would it be Tyler?
Jim?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we have folks in-house that would basically, just put together like a 10% concept and then put together an estimate. To Michael's point, sometimes those numbers can be a little bit higher, also too, based on the availability of equipment, right? And the lead time associated with it. But if it's just to best inform the organization and to inform us of what a rough number would be like. So.
So to Tyler's question, is this enough incentive for you to go down that path, or does there need to be a formal request of you to do that?
Oh, no. We can take up that action item. Like I said, it's been a couple years since we went down that path because we had another opportunity that we were looking at to use the line for storage.
So in your marketing to date of this property, have you gotten any nibbles, any bites, any prospects?
No, I mean, I can't say that I have. We've offered it, and I don't know if that's in a bigger issue with Oregon, to your point, with the competitiveness, or if it's specifically that site. Because a lot of those RFPs that come through, it's not just going to Oregon, it's going to multiple states. And so I don't know if Oregon's losing it or there's something about that particular site. Now, it's off the interstate and it's further away from Portland where a lot of the demand is. So that's working against us. But I don't know that there's anything specifically about the site that's not attractive or keeping people away.
Peter, what do you think about as the owner, representing the ownership there? What do you think about the assessment?
So I think it'd be great if you guys could start that process, even if it's 10% or plus or minus, or may not include the Y track. It's a starting point at least. I think the other thing that Michael and I are working on is some layouts with UP to help promote the site. The more information that I think we can provide customers about its viability helps them, have those answers right away and help sell the site. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer to push those things forward. We do get inquiries, and sometimes they revolve around rail and sometimes they don't. Tyler's helped us recently. We've had a couple of requirements for rail, but they may be shopping multiple other sites. We have another inkling right now, but I don't know if anything's going to come of it, but it's rail centric. So until we get to a decision point about whether to stay with rail or not, there may be a line in the sand based on transportation developments and ODOT and crossings and those types of expenditures that may occur down the road. But until that point in time, we as an ownership group are promoting to everybody that we possibly can.
I think another avenue that, is a little bit harder out west since there's fewer of them. I'd like to get the site into the hands of site selectors. Most site selectors are in the Midwest and in the South. But if we can get it in front of some of the ones we know, maybe we get ahead of those RFIs that go out.
Okay, we have a guest here and yes, we're happy to have questions.
Thank you. I'm Polk County Commissioner, and been on this committee, not currently.
Excuse me for interrupting, Rick. Yeah, sorry, I know we all want to hear this later, so bring it a little bit closer, just a few inches away, all right?
Apologize. Anyway, I've been on this committee for a long time, but I'm not currently in this committee, but was invited here today because this has been a key topic for me for several years. And I'm going to say some of these things with the backdrop of the Millersburg station that we've all invested in, and it sits there bone dead at this point in time. So we've all invested in that. Governments, several different levels, on the if we build it, they will come premise. And that doesn't seem to be happening. And I don't know that it's even happening for the one in Ontario, but you guys could correct me if I'm wrong. But as we go forward, you touched on one of the key factors that at some point, I mean, if I'm controlling this line, I'm going to say there's a point at which we're going to say, that's it, we're done. We're not going to maintain it. And it looks like that today to me. And so it would be nice to know if you guys have a real drop dead, we cannot continue to invest in this line, date or time, to help this body understand that we've got this much time to work with. So I've been saying that for a number of years, that eventually, if you don't use the infrastructure, you're not going to upgrade it on the hope and the prayer that somebody's going to come along and use it. So that's my backdrop. But, I keep wondering, and Peter and Eric, maybe you can help me with this. Has there been a breakdown, an itemized cost estimate for this entire line that's ever been shared to this board, this body? I don't think so. And it's been a question mark all along. It's like, and we're talking about these very questions about how do you make the changes that you might need to make, and to the things that Charlie is saying. I mean, at some point we have to say, look, if it's $3 million to a developer, it could be a deal breaker, right? It could be. Then the question comes to, well, is the state of Oregon really serious about doing this? Really? Again, if we have to apply for a Connect Oregon grant to get some money, is that the objective? And I get that you're a for-profit company and that you need to, I get all that. But getting somebody to commit to 100 cars a week, for example, to this site, as you guys know better than I do, is probably impractical. And so those are some of the kind of things that we fuss over. It's like, what are the answers here? What are the things that your business is looking for in order to partner in this, or to say, yeah, we'll cover X amount of the cost? Because all I have heard over the years that we've been talking about this is like $300,000 a mile to replace iron. Or maybe that's iron and ties. I don't know. But as a county commissioner, I can tell you, we are very paranoid about what's coming and the potential that we get faced with sharing in the cost of putting in a crossing. And again, the city of Dallas should be in the same spot. They got Godsey Road as a hang up right now, going forward and making changes. So those are all things to me are, we really need to have a partnership that helps us break down what is it really going to cost? How can we help share between jurisdictions and your company those expenses, or the state? We just don't know all that kind of stuff. And again, with the backdrop of you got to do it by this time, or we're not going to partner at all because it doesn't make sense. So, and I get you've done a great job of saying there's variables, lots of variables, and I understand that. And I say all that as having been an advocate, both at the legislature, for Lynn County and others, businesses that wanted that investment made at Millersburg. And it breaks my heart to drive by that site and see it sitting there. As I said, bone dead. It's not producing anything. And we spent a lot of money. So I'm just curious about if you guys can give us some guidance and some help to fully understand what the impact, the investment is that would be expected to get to 10 miles an hour. Switches and crossings, et cetera.
Can't comment on Millersburg. I mean, that's a different railroad. I assume you're talking about the intermodal facility that never took off there. So, I mean, different railroad. I have no idea what the background is. All I know it was, I guess, the debacle, to say the least. But there really is no, drop dead point for us for this subdivision. I would think, you might find some other prospect, and that would really be the drop dead point. And we understand that reality, and it's a race for us to get someone in there before it becomes a data center or something else. But as far as the rail itself and getting someone out there, it's there is no drop dead point for us. We're just going to keep searching for the right prospect. As far as figuring out the price, we can do that in fairly short order. And if you want to break down on ties and rail and that sort of thing, ballast, I mean, we can certainly provide that estimate. I guess we just never refined it because we didn't have the customer to, keep moving that far. So that certainly we can provide to you. I don't foresee that being difficult.
One of the,
Has there been a breakdown at all of, I mean, more than just the $300,000 per mile that we've been told?
No, not since I've
I mean, crossings and switches are an element of all this. And those are some big ticket items. And again, that's the challenge that we've had. It's like, we don't know how much we're talking about. How long do we wait for that right customer that's willing to invest that kind of money, if that's on them? And then, a better understanding of, a better understanding of, what kind of expectation, what percentage of investment that you want the private sector, the developer to put in. Because again, if we're all sitting here waiting on a Connect Oregon grant, that's not really the way to plan a development. But I guess that's kind of where we're a little confused or lost, is that we just don't understand what the expectations are from your side.
If I may, if you are able to provide a breakdown of costs to pull in a line with some confines of certain structures, how do we plug in the crossings, which I don't know that you guys would estimate those costs? Is that something that ODOT estimates, or how do we pull that together? Say we get a nice package from you that says, here are the confines of this, the starting point of a whatever 10 mile an hour installation for X number of cars and under these certain circumstances, but we still are missing the piece of crossings. I mean, the rail line might be $1 million, and we've heard every crossing is at least $1 million. And I'm not well versed in this, such as the city may be, as far as how many crossings can be added or deleted or removed, or volume, all those little equations come. I'm just trying to circle back, and how do we get as good a number as we can at this point in time, and who do we need to pull those numbers from?
So generally, we don't come up with these estimates for mainline track because, generally we're only working, at least in my group, we're only working on industry track. But my understanding is that it will include all the signaling and crossing if applicable.
Is there, do you guys have like a range as far as if a customer has a commitment, a minimum or a maximum? And then, based on that number, do you guys kind of have set what investment you're going to push in? If that makes sense? So if somebody's going to commit to you, hey, we're going to do 50 cars a month, is there a set number that you're willing to invest versus a customer that would do 100 or 1,000 in that case? Do you have a range as far as investment goes?
No specific range, and it's not based on volume because all of our railroads are different in terms of the revenue that we get. Generally, we get paid by the large carrier, and a lot of times those are contracts that, they're legacy contracts. We can't change them. So, we don't have the pricing power in most situations to raise our rates or anything like that. We get what we get. So it largely depends on that, but generally that's unusual. Typically, the industry will pay for their industry track. It's unusual that an industry is going to start up something new on an out of service line. That's what creates, makes this a little bit more complicated.
I think what you want from them, Portland and Western, is some sort of a ballpark estimate on what it would cost simply to put this line back in operation, for a 10-mile-an-hour operation. I looked at the line this morning, several places coming over here from Salem, and, I don't see any need for any change in rail. It's all 90-pound to the yard rail. And the rail was laid between 1913 and 1944. But everywhere I looked, I didn't find any rail that was older than 1924 when it was manufactured. So that tells me that I was seeing rail that was actually installed probably in the 1940s, secondhand, no doubt, but still very usable. The tie condition is terrible. I would say that on a minimum, it probably need to do about a 1/3 tie renewal, which would be, there's roughly 3,000 to 3,200 ties per mile. You need to probably renew about at least 1,000 per mile from what I saw this morning. So you could get a ballpark estimate based on that. I mean, it's probably to install a tie these days, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 to $120 a tie. And then to do some surfacing on the track with, some ballast and surfacing, tamping and that sort of thing, which would be so much per foot. That's the kind of an estimate that you could probably get that would say this will put the line back into service. But now, if a customer is locating here in Dallas and is going to need trackage to serve their facility, that's going to be different. That's going to be an additional cost, and that's typically borne by the industry that wants the service. And so, but without knowing what they would want in the way of trackage, it'd be very difficult to get an estimate on that part of it.
So you're looking at at least a couple $100,000 addition for the turnout, which is usually around $150,000 to $200,000 plus however many feet of track that they're going to install. And again, that's usually borne by the industry.
And I would say on the trackage, $200 per foot on trackage is probably ballpark for new track for an industry.
I just wanted to provide one comment. I know that Mr. Pope, you had brought up, when is the railroad planning to rip up the track? I would say that across the industry, it's highly unpopular to rip up track. Track right-of-ways are sometimes made up of easements, and once you rip up that easement, you never get it again. To Bob's point, you never get it back again. So, when you look across Oregon, I think about Tigard. There's a lot of industry parks out in Tigard who have, rail. Looking at Vancouver, Washington, a lot of the back roads also have rail industry. All of that, it is incumbent upon BNSF to keep that accessible in situations such as this, which is we're holding the right of way because over time, I mean, the railroads will survive all of us, right? They're kind of the foundation of infrastructure, right? But in terms of for this particular line, I mean, that has never come up in conversation. And I don't think that that's something that's on anybody's radar. I think it's the opposite as far as, how do you find a long-term sustainable entity? I think of the example of McMinnville and Cascade Steel and kind of the integral relationship that the locality has with the steel mill, and we serve that mill. I think they made landfall, I don't know, I guess that was in the 90s maybe. But, that was, before that, that property was dormant, relatively dormant. And so that's really kind of the vision, at least, being the sales point of contact who covers this railroad, that's kind of the vision that I see for this particular property, is trying to land a comparable entity, given the infrastructure and given the acreage.
Committee, what, does anybody want to, can we make a motion to do something as the committee or request the city to do something?
We made a motion last time and
To entertain.
passed it to study it, to
To
ask
study
them to consider studying this professionally.
Okay. So we have made that, and this is step one, I would imagine. So step two would be to request this financial estimate. And we also need to include all the crossroads and everything. So we have a full-on big picture, and so the city has a full-on big picture.
So we'll take that on
And
as a
so the
deliverable.
owners do. Yeah. And I think the
Oh,
owners in support of that.
Well, Madam Chair, I think the gentleman across from me indicated that, the last time the motion was that the city was going to study the situation. And I think there is some sort of a study going on. I have been contacted by a consulting firm that seems to be looking at this issue among other issues. I'm not sure what all they're looking at here in Dallas, but it would appear that there is something happening with respect to a look at this overall industrial situation. And I don't know, maybe some of you have heard what is going on, but I can say it's just been a kind of a in passing. I'm pretty sure it's David Evans and Associates that I've been hearing from about Dallas, and it's seemed like I've heard more about it in the last 2 or 3 months than at any time previous to that. So it seems like maybe something is starting to happen.
Perhaps we could hear from staff then as what actually is happening and where we are in this process.
I believe what Bob's referring to is the TGM project, which you're all familiar with. So
Okay.
that's actually pretty much wrapped up now. We're just finalizing those final reports with David Evans. And so
Okay.
I think everybody's aware of that project.
So will we have a copy of that report?
Yeah, I think
I
the timing will work out. We could certainly have that for our next meeting.
Would that include this cost estimate?
No, I mean, that was not in the scope of what that
Right.
TGM project was all about.
Okay. So could we include receiving this cost estimate from them?
Understand the question. Sorry. I mean, I think what I heard Michael say is they're going to commit to doing that. I don't know the
Anyway.
timing of that. I don't think we're
Okay.
holding them to a particular timeline because I don't think Michael knows what the timeline is right now, I'm guessing. So I don't know that I think we're on two separate issues that are related. One is the conclusion of a several years long study of a redevelopment plan that David Evans has been working on for us. But it didn't get down to the level of including, costs of rail infrastructure.
But this committee can request that additional information? That's a question.
I think you've already done that, and I
Okay.
think Mike
All
is
right,
committed
just-
to that.
I just want to make sure that that's in
Is
the
that
minutes.
is that
and it's
accurate? I think
clear.
from what I heard, I don't think you need a motion or anything in that regard. I think that's captured. Right. So, yeah. So I think we're
Okay.
we're good. And,
All on the
you
same
know, it's
page.
possible, you know, again, your next meeting is in September. Certainly possible we could have some data by September. I mean, but so.
Anything else? Any more comments? Don't want to close this meeting if there's more to discuss. This has been great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending and presenting. It's helped us a lot.
You're welcome.
Hey, we'll close this meeting, adjourn this meeting, and I'm going to take a couple minute breather and then we'll open the commission meeting briefly. lots to talk about, but we have another meeting to pursue.
We have about $10 million aside. Federal matches. That's what.
Prosperous down there, they're gonna have to move.
Yes.
Okay, let's call the Economic Development Commission meeting open and to order, and we have minutes, and I'm hoping everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes from the May 22nd meeting. Are there any comments or corrections or anything along those lines? If not, let's have a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved.
We have a motion and a second. Okay. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Minutes are approved. Now, we have staff report on really important information. I've read through this, and I can tell you there's a lot of data in this report. And it wasn't all real encouraging. Lost a lot of construction jobs. That's one of the things that I noticed in all the data. But I'd like to just turn this over to Charlie and Tyler and have them give us a little summary. We have a short time because several people have to leave early, some having appointments and meetings at 2:00 in Salem. I have another meeting at 2:00 here in Dallas, and I don't know about any others. Peter also has another meeting at 2, so let's see if we can move through this. So who's going to speak up?
I will take on this report.
Thank you.
So yes, as you'll notice, we did include both the state and federal most recent jobs report we had available. Just as a addition of information that I know was requested by the body. I'm not going to go in and analyze that. There's plenty of pages from both departments that will do that. But just some of the things I wanted to highlight on the report is under priority 3 with urban renewal and downtown revitalization, we had a new grant cycle that began with the new fiscal year on July 1st. The application window opened in April, closed June 11th. We received 2 applications requesting $50,000 in total from the agency for the Building Improvement Grant Program, and both were approved. And so we've updated the table here to reflect the grant amount that we've dispersed this year, as well as the total private investment from both of those projects. So right now, where that program is standing, it's about $2.40 of private investment for every dollar of urban renewal funds that we spent. So just wanted to provide you with an update there on that program. And then additionally, like Peter has mentioned, we've been working with Peter and Business Oregon for a couple of RFIs that have come in. The most recent one is dubbed Project Save. And the business is described as an emergency preparedness equipment manufacturer. We didn't receive a specific timeline on what the decision would be from this business, but we submitted the mill site as one of those, as a site for the RFI, and Business Oregon will be relaying that information to the potential user. Additionally, we were able to take a tour of the West Valley Industrial Park in late June. Ben and I made a visit out there and met with Ken Perkins, who's the owner and developer of the property. He showed us around the site, as well as the new first building that's been built there for kind of the industrial space that he owns and will be utilizing. And it's a very impressive space. It's a very impressive site. And he shared quite a bit about the businesses that have already claimed lots and their plans for development, which has been really exciting. And I know that For some of the few vacant lots that are left, we've reached out to our friends at Ted Core, specifically Alex, just to let folks know that on the smaller industrial plot side that there's some availability there. And then additionally, I know that this was a topic of interest at the last meeting, so I did want to provide some updates on it. We've been in contact with two potential leads interested in the former Rite Aid property. One of those leads has progressed farther than the other to the point of requesting a pre-application conference, and that conference was last week, right, Charlie? And so that conference was last week. Both of the prospective businesses are national chains in the hardware agriculture supply space. And like I had mentioned, one is farther along in the process. They've been going through the steps on their end for zoning verification, the pre-application process, fully understanding the site itself. And based on the conversation with us, it seems like they're intending to submit a bid for that property with the hopes of development. And so once we have more information on that, we'll definitely let you all know. But it was encouraging to us at the staff level that there hasn't been such a big gap between the closure of Rite Aid and the interest in the property. And I think that reinforces something that, Charlie and I talked about since we both started here and is identified in the economic opportunities analysis. And it's just been identified throughout the community is that there's a demand for additional commercial space. And so we think this further reinforces that. And then also on the note of commercial space, we did have really productive meetings with some folks who are interested in developments in the Lockerell node area. These are folks that have been in contact with the city for, I think, 10 plus years now. And so we've maintained contact with them and let them know about the status of the sewer project. Let them know kind of what the timeline is on that. That way they can best coordinate potential development there. And so one of those meetings was with a potential developer and one was with the landowner, and they may be working together to do some development on the parcels that they own. And it seems like that the timelines for our project and their project would match up. And so again, we have more information on that as we get closer, we'll definitely be able to share that with you all. And that's kind of the big highlights out of the report that I wanted to highlight. And I know I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have specifically from the report.
But where is Fred, Tebb, and Sons property? What is that? I probably shouldn't know, but I don't.
Some of you may know that as the Dallas Planing Mill. It's on
Oh.
Holman Avenue, 1415 is the address.
Mhm.
Holman Avenue. Right across the tracks from the high school and the Polk, Chemeketa Polk Center.
So in the large, if I may, in the large grants, there's another $25,000 of the allocated 75. Is that now in play, or do you need to take some action to extend the deadline?
Already reopened the application process and received interest on that remaining grant amount. So we expect to see some applications. That application period will close in August. And so if we receive applications at that time, those will be considered by the agency at the next available meeting.
And we've already received applications and made some funding awards?
Yes. So in the first round of the application window, we received 2 applications and awarded both of those applications the full $25,000 that they're eligible for and that they requested. And so, like Brian had mentioned, we have about $25,000 remaining. And so we've reopened the application period and we've received interest from 2 folks. One seems to be more likely to apply. So again, depending on the amount of applications, the agency may decide to either award all the funding to one applicant or split the funding as they see fit if there's multiple applications. But that is something that we'll address when this next application period closes in August. And then we'll go through the process of scoring the applications, writing a staff report, and presenting it to the agency at the next available meeting.
So I noticed that when we're talking about the applications, you'll say 2 applications requesting funds, both have been approved, whatever. Is there a reason why this committee cannot know what these applications are, what businesses they're related to? Where are we going to see improvements?
Sure. Yeah, we're happy to share that information. We just wanted to keep it fairly general since it already is a long update most of the time. But one of the applications was for New Morning Bakery. And so they're going to be doing a roof replacement and weatherization of their roof, as well as additional HVAC improvements for the building. Excuse me. And then the other grant award was, it's not a current business, but it's a property on the corner of Oak and Church. The address is, I believe, 217 Oak Street. It's a former residence that is, the new owner has inherited the property and is looking to convert it into commercial space. And so they requested a grant for the work related to that. And so that work's predominantly going to be related to the ADA access and ADA required changes for commercial spaces. And then that property owner's intent is to renovate that space, prepare it for commercial use, and then have it leased out.
Rita?
Great.
How much was remaining in the small grant fund when it closed on 30 June?
$5,000.
$5,000. Can that be carried over into the new year, or does that go back in the general fund for the Urban Renewal District?
So it rolls back into the beginning fund balance, but the actual amount that's budgeted for that program remains at 10,000 for the current fiscal year.
But if we wanted to, for instance, if we spent the 10,000, that 5,000 actually rolled into the contingency fund or something like that, I suppose.
Basically, yeah. So
You
if
could
you
make
wanted-
an argument that maybe you could bring some of that money back if
Right.
we've got a high demand for that.
there's a mechanism to bring that money back into that program. It would require an action of the agency to free up the contingency fund.
We'll try to get that $10,000 spent for you somehow.
That'd be good.
But we did have one application that we had to turn down because they wanted to paint a building. So we had to tell them the rules have changed.
So just FYI, Fred Tebbs had an operation on the mill site that we leased to them. It has been basically non-operational for the last 6+ months. They are vacating the space. The space is 16,000 square feet up for lease right now, with strong electrical service. So we are marketing to manufacturers and machinists right now. So just FYI.
I'll connect with you, Peter, to get the information on there.
It's on the it's through our brokers. It's on the listing service, but I'll help you in any way I can. Second, I may have missed a point, but recently the old kind of hodgepodgey gas station car wash was demoed on the entrance, which is a high visibility point coming into downtown. And I'm not sure if anybody touched on status. I was just curious if there's any knowledge about what is happening with that particular site.
Yeah, so they've gone through the planning process, and now they're in the demolition / construction process. So they've completed the physical work of the demolition. I believe that there needs to be done some inspections and some work, I believe on the environmental side, to close out the demolition. And then the building department is in the process of reviewing the actual building permit before construction can begin.
So it's a mixed use project as proposed, 4 stories of residential above 1 story of commercial. They're hitting a few snags with the state building division because of the proximity. Their vision is to retain the fueling station adjacent to residential. Apparently nobody's ever seen that done before, so they're really struggling to figure out how to make those two uses work together. So there's a bit of challenge going on right now. That's about all I know on that. So you may not see as much progress happening as quickly as we might like, and that's part of the reason why, in addition to what Tyler mentioned, there's some issues with DEQ and the storage tanks as well, I think.
Question is different kind of topic here. Charlie probably knows about it. Right next to Syntec, there's a great big open piece of property there, and it's got waist-high weeds. The whole thing does that have to go through the report of concern program, or is Code Services out there tagging grassy lots now?
Well, we have an active weed abatement program. I don't know the status of weed abatement on that particular parcel. I believe in some years past, they've actually harvested off of that piece of
It's
land.
weeds now. It's
Yeah. So yes, I would say if you're concerned about it,
Queen
you
Anne
should-
Slade.
you should report that, and so that they're aware of it and they can contact the
Okay.
property owner.
It presents an unattractive
Yeah.
look to
Speaking
our
of that
downtown.
property though, Tyler, you might want to just update some of your recent connections with that property.
Yes. So we sent two letters out to the property owners. And I received an email earlier this week. And so the property owners are interested in sitting down with us at the city, and we're working to get a meeting set up to discuss the property and how to best market it for industrial use. And it seems like those developers are still interested in residential development in Dallas. And so we're hopeful to connect them with some other potential areas in Dallas that could be good for residential development, while providing them the help to market those particular parcels for industrial development, because we believe that would probably be the best fit for that area.
Amen.
Glad you're keeping it for that purpose.
Well, that's how it's zoned.
Yeah.
And the council's already made it very clear, at least in the past, that they're not interested in changing the zoning there. So,
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah, on the 791 Main Street project, sorry to see that didn't get any interest, but these things do happen. Do we know, have we talked to the people that were potentially interested to see why they didn't submit anything?
Yeah. And Charlie can probably speak about it in more detail, but the general feedback we got from one of the potential submitters was that potential submitter wanted to do a residential project and believed that the city would more likely prefer a hotel project, which admittedly that is what was listed as the first preference. But I don't think on the city side we would outright reject a strong proposal for residential development. And then additionally, some of the other feedback that we received from some folks was just general, just kind of the market wasn't quite right at the time, whether that's interest rates, construction costs, those types of things. But since then, the folks that we've been working with, Brian Vanneman, they've said that they're still going to be working on pushing the site to potential developers, and we're going to be working on setting up some one-on-one meetings with folks that we think would be strong candidates. And that's something that we're going to continue to push and market it with that site.
Maybe the people with the Centex site that want to do residential could move over.
That could be a possibility, and I think that is something that obviously, when I get that meeting set up with them, that we can bring up, as well as the other potential sites in the Lockreal node and elsewhere that could be multifamily development.
Kind of points out one of the, it's great to have public input into the process, but sometimes, your public interest conflicts with economic reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, but
maybe was just not economically viable.
yeah, and I think I wouldn't close the door on a hotel development quite yet, because in other counties and in smaller communities, there continues to be heavy investment in lodging, particularly as it relates to its proximity to the wine industry, and that's still a place for growth that we see in Dallas is wine tourism, and this hotel being a portion of that. Um, Again, I think even though that's been the preferred option on the RFQ when we had that out, I think again a strong housing project would still earn our consideration.
One of the things the Downtown Association is doing is trying to encourage the development of businesses that would be attractive. If you had a boutique hotel there, for instance, they walk out the door and there'd be bookstores, wine tasting shops, brew pub, co-working spaces, art galleries, that kind of thing. And instead of, let's just say, churches and gyms and schools and government buildings. I don't think those are attractive to tourists, what I just mentioned. They're okay locally, I guess, but if you're going to have the boutique hotel, you really need the ambiance all around it.
There's a lot of what I'll call chicken and egg going on with development. Just like we heard with the rail and the mill site. The same thing here. It's like we're trying to grow our tourism industry, but we know we don't have lodging to support it. Something's got to move first. We may not have some of the auxiliary retail to support the lodging either. So, but something has to go first to catalyze the other things to happen later. And so
sometimes you can look for hints of how things are going by looking, say, at bed and breakfasts. That might be an indicator of a demand for kind of local housing for tourists. And we don't have any that I know.
yeah, and the short-term rental option is a component of what was being promoted, as an option. And then we're aware of projects like this where they've actually done a combination of short-term rentals and long-term lodging, essentially, or apartments. And so you can do some intermixing of that in the same site.
Yeah, that would work quite well, probably.
Yeah.
And you know that chicken and egg thing, you sort of can do some interim stuff to kind of tie it together with smaller steps. Incidentally, the project of doing the Alice Antique Mall is pursuing very well. They're actively working in there. It's the $264,000 grant that we got for that from SHPO. There's not going to be those grants in the next 3 years, so the legislature didn't renew the program, which was a big disappointment for us because we tap into that grant regularly. That was up to $400,000 going away. We do have the Diamonds in the Rough grant, which is a $20,000 50-50 match we're working with people on. And that could combine with Tyler's program there, the 25,000, which is also a 50-50 match. That could bring out $45,000 for the right project with a 50-50 match, which isn't a bad deal by any means.
Yes. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. If there's nothing else, I mean, it's
Going.
gone. Okay,
Thank you.
meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
We'll work.